that people here would take a second to understand why it seems so discomforting that a community, a faith community, a minority in America, might be seen to be singled out on this issue, on extremism, where, constantly the FBI would say that, white militant groups, white militias are actually the most dangerous groups in America at the moment. They present the biggest threat to American interests here domestically.
All right, folks, that's a Muslim student addressing a question to the Secretary of Homeland Security at Harvard recently. And you heard his reference to what the FBI would say who the most dangerous groups in America are, and that's white militias. And Johnson then went on to agree with him, not surprisingly. Andy McCarthy joins us, Senior Policy Fellow at the National Review Institute, a contributing editor to National Review, and author of so many great books, including Faithless Execution, Building the Political Case for Obama's Impeachment. Hello, sir.
Steve, how are you?
I'm good. Mets opening day is just a couple of days away, so the world is good, right?
Yeah, counting it down. I don't know how much we'll like watching Kansas City raise the World Series banner, but I'm ready to get going.
Yeah, I'm glad, though, that they pit them two together to open the season. That's pretty cool. All right, let's get on to this. You wrote a great piece recently at nationalreview.com about Ted Cruz and his Muslim surveillance proposal and how he's got it right. And this isn't about Trump versus Cruz, because Trump said, I agree with Ted Cruz on this. So what is the disconnect between the media and the Democrats, the radical left-wing party, element of the Democratic Party, and the media, which is one and the same, and the rest of the country, which basically would agree with Ted Cruz?
Yeah, I think, Steve, here's how depressing it is with the government. They won't, even a quarter century almost after the World Trade Center bombing, they won't yet come to grips with the fact that the jihadists, the people who actually do the on-the-ground terrorism work, are ideologically motivated by a Quran-based ideology. And what we're seeing in Europe, so that's where their heads are at, the reality of our situation is that the jihadists are able to succeed because they have a much broader support network that's also ideologically driven by a Quran-based doctrine, which, again, we have to say this all the time. It's not the only way of interpreting Islam, but it is a mainstream interpretation of Islam, particularly in the Middle East.
And the support group is within their own communities.
Exactly. So my frustration is, if we're not even ready to come to grips with what the people who are doing the actual killing are motivated by, how are we ever going to accomplish security when the security problem requires addressing the ideology not just in the jihadists themselves but in their support network? I just don't know how we do it. If we're so still politically correct that we can't even acknowledge what it is that's motivating the people who are actually killing us, what do we do here?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely right. And, I guess not shocked, because I guess when you need to keep your job, you'll say anything, and that is an indictment of Bill Bratton. I just, he not only blasted Ted Cruz once, twice, he went days after he went on the shows and blasted Ted Cruz as this bigot and how outrageous this scenario is, when New York City did something quite similar until Bill Bratton ended it, and they did it successfully.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting about all this, Steve, and I should say, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm with Ted Cruz's National Security Advisory Team, right? So, having that on the table, I thought when I read what Bratton said carefully, some of it was preposterous, where he said that, for example, he acknowledged that the threat was ideologically based, but said that counterterrorism can't have an ideological component whatsoever. Right. And that's just it's beneath Bratton, who's a much more sophisticated guy, to say something so idiotic. But if you read everything else that Bratton said, it sounded to me like, look, wink, wink, we're still doing a lot of what we did after 9/11. We just can't talk about it in this political environment. And Ted Cruz's great sin here was basically to speak reality. And I think what Bratton's difficulty is he's dealing with a hard left administration and a national security and a New York City security problem that requires a hard-headed, reality-based counterterrorism. So I think he's required in this difficult spot he's in to say these goofy, politically correct things, and at the same time, you have to hope the NYPD continues to do what it started doing after 9/11.
I hope you're right, Andy, and if you are right, it must be eating them up inside, and I don't know how you survive. By the way, you were talking about a quarter century from the first World Trade Center bombing, not obviously 9/11. I just want people to say, what's he talking about? There was a first World Trade Center bombing. Andy, thank you as always, my friend.
Thanks, Steve.
Give Me 5 is next, folks. Don't go away.